out, and on one particular verse, when we get there, I read about 10 or 15 different commentaries. And do y'all know how to tell a good commentary from a not so good commentary? Do what, Don? Well, that too. If it's a really good commentary, they'll skip anything that's controversial. So I went to like 10 or 15 commentaries, and I could not get a straight answer from any of them. So I will give you some ideas, and I don't know that we will have the answers in this life. All right, in verses 1 through 3, Satan is going to be bound. Now, there are those who believe that we are in the 1,000-year millennial kingdom now. They believe that Satan is bound now. And every time I think of that, it's like, boy, if Satan's bound, can you imagine what it's going to be like when he gets out? Obviously, Satan is not bound. We're 100% certain of that. Now, the chapter 20 actually continues from chapter 19, where the beast and the false prophet were cast into the lake of fire. And then it picks up with Satan being bound. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. Instead of the lake of fire where the beast and false prophet were thrown, Satan will be cast into a bottomless pit for 1,000 years. Now, I think you were with me a time or two, but when we were in college, we used to go to Mammoth Cave quite frequently. And you weren't there in any of those trips. Somehow they arranged it to where a lot of the times we would rent cabins, spend the night. That way we could take the 4-hour tour and take several shorter tours. On the 4-hour tour, I think it was the 4-hour tour, there was a place that, had this big hole and a sign that said, bottomless pit, 108 feet. And it's like, every time I saw that, I thought, this pit is going to be bottomless. There will be no bottom to it. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation where it is. A lot of ideas about where it is. And how can it be bottomless? There's a couple of ideas that I think maybe give us some answers. I think both of these are very plausible. One of them is that the bottomless pit, he will be dropped to the center of the earth where hell is currently. And what happens if you could drill deep enough, and if there was an opening and you drop in the earth, you go down and back up, kind of like a yo-yo. There would be no place to stop. He would be down, fall down when he got to the other side, fall down when he got to the other side, fall down. Some people think that's what it refers to. Others think that, and this one's prodded my curiosity a little bit, that it will be the vast universe. How far out does the universe go? We've never seen the end of the universe yet. We used to think, when I was in little bitty school, that the universe consisted of the Milky Way. And when you got to the end of the Milky Way, that was it. That was the end of the universe. Then as we got more powerful telescopes, the Milky Way is just a little speck. The entire Milky Way from Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and I still include Pluto because that's what it was when I was in school. That makes up the Milky Way, and that's the universe. Now we know that the entire Milky Way from the sun all the way out to Pluto is just a little speck in the whole universe. So many people think he'll be cast into the universe, And he'll just keep falling and falling and falling and falling through the entire universe. Which one it is, I don't know. But if it was into the center of the earth, it would always be down. You know, if I'm standing here, earth would be down. When we were in Australia, on the other side of the earth, we were still pointing down. So down would be any direction that you were on earth. Both of those are very plausible. He is bound. And again, I'm skipping over a lot of the speculation. How can you bind a spirit? Just pass right through it, wouldn't he? You know, he would, spirit. Well, and I put in my notes, I don't know how he's going to be bound, but somehow God has a plan and a place and a purpose. Somehow God is going to have him bound, and Satan will not be able to get free. Now, who is this character? Well, in verse 2, he's called the dragon, the old serpent, the devil, and Satan. All of these are used to refer to Satan and a few other things as well. But I put in there the dragon in the tribulation period is the one who has been primarily responsible for torturing and killing the Christians. The serpent was the one that deceived Eve in the garden and brought mankind upon, brought sin upon mankind and brought the curse on the earth. There are a lot of references to Satan as the old serpent. He's slick. He sneaks in without looking. He is, there's a lot of things with the serpent. Then he's called the devil, who the Bible says is the accuser before God day and night for against you and I. When you sin, Satan immediately says, did you see what he did? Did you see what she did? And he accuses us like he tried to do Job there in the book of Job. Does Job serve God for naught? In other words, the only reason Job serves God is what he can get out of it. And of course, God proved that wrong. So the devil is the accuser, whereas Satan is the enemy who has tried to destroy Christ since right after the beginning of creation. He tried to destroy Christ. He tried to destroy the seed of David over and over. He tried to destroy the nation of Israel from which the Messiah would come. He is the enemy. He tried to kill Christ through Herod and others. Satan is the one who has always tried to overthrow God and take as many people with him as he can. Now, the controversy is those 1,000 years. I found it interesting, and people that are not of our persuasion, some of them Baptists, but they don't agree with our pre-trib, premillennial, that this is not a literal 1,000 years. It's just figurative that stands for a long time. And since God does not live in time, God is eternal, this 1,000 years could be figurative, not literal, simply meaning that it's going to last for a long, long time. Satan is sealed. Now, if you recall earlier, we've covered what a seal does. You remember? A seal is what you put on something to seal it, to, keep it from being violated. It can be a number of things. When I'm mailing letters, and I'm working on your track, I'm having trouble getting it down that small, but I'm working on a track that'll fit into a number 9 return envelope. But, when I mail a letter, I always put one of those "In God We Trust" stickers right across the point of the envelope. You know, where the envelope comes down, I put it right across the front. And if it's a straight across, I'll put one about a third and one about a third, so that if it's torn open, they can tell it. They'll know. So, you know, we seal things. Somehow, God seals the bottomless pit so that Satan cannot get out until God releases him in a few verses down. Now, without Satan and his henchmen, the earth for 1,000 years will enjoy relative peace and quiet. There'll be no dishonest judges, no crooked politicians. Wait a minute, I repeat myself, didn't I? There'll be no bribes. You can't bribe the ones who are ruling and reigning with Christ. It will be perfect justice, perfect everything. It will be ruled and reigned by the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And there will be no murders, apparently. There will be no fighting, no anything for 1,000 years. But man still has a sinful nature. And we'll see that. But there won't be any Satan to tempt it. We have that sinful nature, and right now, Satan plays on that sinful nature. You know, I don't know about you all, but he fights me and fights me every day, sometimes every hour, every minute, sometimes it seems almost every second. But Satan will not be there to tempt anybody. But they will have their sinful nature. Now, verses 4 through 6, he refers to, and if you've got a Bible that gives references in your between the verses, my Bible says this is the first resurrection. And that's the one that most people seem to not know what it means, or else they just completely skipped it altogether. Verse 2, verse 3, and verse 5 are often used to teach a post-millennial rapture. Let me give you some terms. Hopefully you already know these. But what do I mean by pre-millennial rapture? Pre meaning before. So pre-millennial means the rapture will take place before the 1,000 years of millennial reign. Pre-trib, and you can be a premillennial and not be a pre-trib. Pre-trib says that the rapture will take place before the tribulation period. Now, among pre-trib, there are mid-trib. What would that be? Pre-trib is before the tribulation. What would mid-trib be, or mid-tribulation? During or in the middle. And as we've seen in Revelation, there are some things, and back in Daniel and Ezekiel also, there are some things in the middle of the tribulation, 7 years, there's going to be some major changes. Those are pre-millennial, but mid-trib, and then the post-trib and the premillennial would pretty much go hand in hand. So in the context, you can't take verses 2, 3, and 5 out of context against the rest of the Bible and prove a post-millennial rapture. This is where context is so important. Context of the chapter. It's talking about the tribulation period, the beginning of the millennial kingdom. So, all right, that doesn't really tell us what when the rapture is going to take place. So we have to go back to the context of the book. In the context of the book, chapters 2 and 3, we saw the churches alive and thriving. And then at the beginning of chapter 4, the churches are caught out before the tribulation period begins. Then you have to go back, not only to the chapter and verse, you have to go back to the book. Then you have to go to the entire Bible, where pre-trib, premillennial is taught throughout the Bible. So I know there's a lot of terms there. But in the context, the first resurrection in verse 2, in verse 3 and 5, the first resurrection cannot refer to the rapture by itself. I'm going to go ahead because I'll come back to that in a minute. When John looked and saw, he saw in verse 4 many thrones, and they sat on them or upon them. And judgment was given unto them. Who are they and them? And again, I just updated my software, so I got a whole bunch of new commentaries now. And again, as with so many things, who is they and them? They sat on the thrones, and judgment was given unto them. Who is it? The two most popular ideas are that it is the saints that we saw in chapter 19. We saw the armies that were in heaven, verse 14, followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. That is one very popular idea, is that this refers to the saints who have lived and died prior to this time. And they refer to the parable of the talents. You know, one man was given 1 talent, one was given 5 talents, one was given 10 talents. And when they came back, Jesus said, "Thou hast been faithful over a few. I'm going to make you ruler over many things." So we find out that those will be made rulers some way, somehow, somewhere. So the saints were promised that we will be made rulers. But it could also be those saints that were killed during the tribulation period, 7 years. And I lean toward that in the context. Why? Let's look at verse 2. He laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, bound him 1,000 years, cast him into the bottomless pit, shut him up, set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed for a little season. In verse 4, I saw the thrones, they sat upon him, judgment was given to them, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark in their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned or ruled with Christ 1,000 years. If we stay with context, the only group of people that are mentioned as reigning with him are the souls that were killed during the tribulation period. And evidently there's a large number of people that will not receive the mark of the beast, will not worship the beast, will not worship the false prophet. They're going to be beheaded as it said in verse 4. They are going to be beheaded. They're going to be killed. And in the context, these are the people that John saw immediately after he saw the thrones and people giving judgment over the nations. That would make the most sense in the context. Now, what about the rest of us? Well, the Bible doesn't really tell us much about the rest of us. We do know that we are going to rule and reign somewhere, somehow. We are going to rule and reign. But many people think, and I lean this direction, that our rule will be set up after Satan is cast into the lake of fire. The earth is made new, new heavens, new earth. There's still going to be the judgment of the nations, where there will be nations that will survive the judgment. And many people think, and I lean, but I'm not fallen yet, that we will rule and reign with Christ throughout eternity over those nations that were judged there in the book of Matthew. Like I said, nobody really knows 100%, but the context seems to indicate this 1,000 years belongs to those that were beheaded who did not receive the mark of the beast. Now, imagine a world where all judges and all leaders were true Christians. I have not kept in contact with a lot of people I used to know well. I've just kind of drifted away from most of them. I didn't have time to be involved in some things, and so. But I do have in my phone. I kept their numbers in case I ever get in a real bind. I have one man I used to know fairly well, is a sitting judge in Texas. I had a couple of good friends that were judges. And talking to the one up here, he's amazing. He's one of those judges. I don't care who you are. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what identity you choose. This is the law, and it doesn't matter who or what you are. I'm going to follow the law. In Texas, we had a judge who was known as the hanging judge. Got to know him pretty well. Again, didn't matter who you were. Wouldn't it be nice if all judges, all mayors, all city councils, that every ruler and every judge was a true Christian? And judgment was meted out by the offense. Now, in verse 5, and this is where it really gets interesting. The rest of the dead lived not until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Who are the rest of the dead? It's certainly a good possibility. But the first resurrection, that's where I looked at almost every one of my commentaries, and there's only one that I actually agreed with. How many resurrections have there been already on earth? How many resurrections have there been? This wasn't intended to be a trick question. Who was the first one I got to phrase it right. Who was the first one to rise from the dead? I know in the Old Testament, they were raised from the dead. Jesus raised 3 people from the dead. But who was the first to rise from the dead? Christ, thank you. He was the first resurrection. He was the first fruits, guaranteeing a full resurrection or full harvest. All right? The first resurrection consists of many different parts. Now, and I tried to think of an illustration to illustrate this, and I'm not very good at making up illustrations. This is not the best illustration, but hopefully you'll get the idea. Everybody knows Steve and Tracy are excellent cooks. Excellent cooks. I mean, we've got other excellent cooks, but I'm going to use you all as an example. Tracy gets up and says, I'm going to make a cake. What's the first thing she's going to do? Is that what she said? Make you do it? Oh. Okay. Making a cake actually consists of several different things. Making a cake, and you may do it in a different order, you got to get the pans out. Then you got to get the flour. We're talking about scratch, not where you open a can and pop it. It's still making a cake, but you got to mix everything together. It's many steps, but it's one cake, and you're only making one cake, even though there's a lot of steps in it. In the Bible, and I don't have time to go all the way back to the Old Testament, when the Jews in the Old Testament saw the coming of Christ, they looked forward and saw the coming of Christ. And then all they saw was Christ setting up his kingdom. It's all they saw in the Old Testament. Here comes Christ. He sets up his kingdom on earth. But there are many, many steps. I wished I had, when I was in, don't ask me why I remember this, but when I was in 4th grade, I was homeschooled by a teacher that actually came to our home. I was laid up in a cast and could not go to school. But she had an illustration, and I wished I could make it or find it. I don't even have anything close. But maybe I do. Don't hurt yourself. But sit down or lean over. If you're already sitting, lean over and look at the top of the pew. And all you can see is the top of the pew all the way back. You don't see the seats below it. You don't see the other things. All you see, if you get it just right, is the top of the pews. In the Old Testament, they looked down, saw the coming of Christ, setting up his kingdom. But there was a couple of valleys in there that when they looked down, they did not see the suffering Messiah. They did not see Jesus Christ coming as a Savior and a sacrifice. They looked down and all they saw was Christ coming to set up his kingdom. And that's where the idea came that the resurrection of Christ actually consists of 3 different things. Some include a 4th one. There's the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That was the first resurrection. Then the Bible teaches there will be the second resurrection, which is still called, it's referred to, especially in the Old Testament, as the resurrection. Like I said, all they're seeing is the mountaintops as they look down. And then the third resurrection, as we saw over in a previous chapter were the souls that were under the altar that had been killed during the tribulation. And they cried out, Lord, how long are you going to make us wait? How long before you avenge us? They will still be part of the first resurrection. It's just in 3 separate parts. Did I make that plain, or do I need to try harder? Does everybody get what I was trying to say? It's one resurrection, but it's in 3 separate parts. Just as one cake is made up of multiple ingredients, one cake, multiple ingredients, one resurrection in 3 separate phases, but it's still referred to as one resurrection. All right, verses 7 through 9. If you have any questions about that, see Don, he'll be more than glad to answer them for you. 7 through 9, Satan is loosed for a little season. In verse 7, when the 1,000 years is over, they've had perfect leaders, perfect judges, perfect everything. 1,000 years, they've had no problems. And as soon as Satan is loosed, he goes out to deceive the nations, which are in the 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog. That's why this battle is often called the Battle of Gog and Magog. Ezekiel talks about this. To gather them together to battle. People for 1,000 years have enjoyed peace, tranquility, straight judgment, but they still have that sinful nature. And as soon as Satan gets out, he goes to these 4 quarters of the earth. He begins to play on their sinful nature and convinces them that, you know what? Satan, God bound me. God plagued you for 7 years. You've had peace for 1,000 years. But I still think we can overthrow God. So he convinces all of these nations to come together to battle. The number is as the sand of the sea, innumerable, more than you can count. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. We're going to capture this thing. We're going to destroy this city of God. We're going to destroy the bride. We're going to destroy Christ. And they all gather together and start marching toward, the Jerusalem there. And fire came down from God out of heaven and destroyed them. You can't fight against God. You can't do it. You can try. You can try, but you're going to lose. Satan, for 6,000 plus years, has tried everything he knows to destroy God, to destroy the church, to destroy Christians. He has lost every single time. Yeah, he's destroyed some individuals. He's destroyed some individual churches, but he's never been able to destroy the kind of church that Jesus built. You would think after all this time, he would have learned his lesson, but he's still going to try one more time to destroy God. And God's going to say, look at all these armies. Unnumberable as the sand, whatever. You can't count them. They're as the sand of the sea. Oh my, we're in trouble. They're gone. That's it. They're gone. Oh, I have some concerns for America. I have a lot of concerns with Mr. Biden being president. The only thing that makes me want to keep Mr. Biden is Miss Harris. If there's anything worse than Mr. Biden, it would be Miss Harris. But you know what? The heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Mr. Biden is right under the control of God and what God allows him to do. All right, anybody got a question besides Casey? I can never answer his questions. Today is the 25th.